This is Between the Lines. Today, we dissect the road less traveled.
Hello, we are today again with the road less traveled, just a few chapters to finish. Actually, this is chapter 60, Resistance to Grace. And then we have the next chapter, the last one of the book. And we have, after that, a video to close the whole section and the whole ideas and last notes. The doctor has an afterwards, so he talks about some things he wants to mention, some notes he has taken during this process, and I might add something or just to recap the whole 50 to 51 chapters of the book, which is really long, has been really long. But yeah, this chapter is chapter 50, Resistance to Grace. And as we talked in the last chapter about the myth of Orestes and his furies, the symptoms, we actually compare that to his symptoms to his mental illness, and he healed himself not using psychotherapy, but he healed himself, he cured himself by asking to the gods in the myth for the relief from the furies, from the relief from his symptoms. And he went to trial. And when he went to trial, he acknowledged that he was the one responsible for the actions he had done, he had committed, and for killing his mother. And that is when the gods decided to relieve him from the furies and transform those furies into three wisdom counsels for him to have a good luck for the rest of his life. So he did cure himself. He didn't need psychotherapy at the time, at least in that story. And the doctor mentions that it is possible for you to heal without psychotherapy, but psychotherapy is one of the best tools known. At least he's a psychiatrist, for curing mental illnesses. And he also mentions, even though sometimes he says, when I have a great successful case, when my patient has been cured, I feel tempted to say, I cure him, or I cure her, or I cure them. But actually, the patient is the one healing themselves, because they are taking responsibility, because they are working and putting effort into their own healing. So he's just a catalyst to the whole process. And the process may vary from few months to an extension of several years of treatment. And that is why the doctor asks himself why sometimes his patients seem to be cured in a short period of time, or sometimes they seem to take longer. Why is that? What are those differences? Is it because of the nature of the problem, or is it because people? And sometimes it's both. And he mentions here that, just to recap, now we are arriving to the last chapters of the book. He said, remember that we have three main categories, we could say, of mental illnesses, but this severity, or this spectrum, as we use today, nowadays we use spectrum of mental illness as a word. He talks about severity at the time. So he says we could have high severity, medium severity, and low severity of or spectrum of the mental illnesses. And he mentions that these mental illnesses addressed in this book are due to poor parenting, which it is, again, at the time it was mostly related your childhood or your upbringing was related directly to your parents, but today we could say tutors, environment, and the people we are surrounded by at different ages. So mental illnesses that have a high severity, which are generally called psychosis, they are sometimes and most of the time almost impossible to cure. And these traumas or this situation happens for us or for people when they are up to 9 months, during their first 9 months of life. So these are really hard to to cure psychosis. Then we have in this spectrum like a medium severity in these mental illnesses, and that's when we have character disorders that we have talked about also, and they occur, or the trauma, the origin or the origination of these disorders come from 9 months of life and up to 2 years times old. So then we have the lowest or the low severity of mental illnesses, but they also exist, and almost everyone of us has some symptom or some trait of this in this whole spectrum, right? And the low ones are neuroses, which are developed from 2 to 5 or 6 years old. And those are much easier to cure, according to the doctor, than the previous ones. However, he says this is just a schema that psychiatrists or psychotherapists work by, but it's not, as we call nowadays, written in stone or fixed. It's something that can vary, and there are some difficulties that can be healed, even though they seem impossible to, but they can be healed. And this also has to do with the upbringing of the parent. For example, due to a certain problem, the parents didn't have the opportunity to do a good job, we could say, just judging a bit, during these periods of time that we have talked to up to 6 years old. But then during the adolescence and other times in their life, they can somehow help heal that wound that was that happened at those ages. And so there is not only one factor. It's not, as we tend to say in general, that, and I've heard this personally, that some people say, I don't want to go to the therapist because they will say that everything in my life is due to my parents, and my parents are the ones to blame. But that's not the case. There are many, many factors that we have during our healing or during the cure of different mental illnesses. So in reality, he says, even though you have this schema, like to understand where you could have the origin of your illness or whatever, there is something even much more important, which is the will to grow. And this will to grow is the one that will help you really cure. Remember, if we remember the case of Orestes, for example, he did want to cure. He thought a lot about it, and that is why he asked the gods for relief or for saving or for the cure. So he had the will to undergo this, even the process of a trial. And so the doctor says here that genuinely loving people are people, by definition, are growing people, are people that are willing to grow all the time if they are loving. And what does he mean by loving? Loving themselves first and then extending their love, as we mentioned in the chapter love, so I will not go into that depth. So, mate. But anyways, during are talked about love and in that section, the doctor asks several questions, but the most important here is, why is it that some people, even though they have a very loving environment, they have a lovely therapist, they have all the support they need, or from the external part, we could say, from their environment, from their parents, from their therapists, from the ones friends and everything, they don't seem to heal, or they don't seem to respond successfully to a treatment. They just discard it or leave treatment, or they just don't get healed. And why is that other people that have no therapy, or they cannot, they don't have a really good environment to become loving or to become cured from their illnesses, they do make something different and they heal themselves, even though they have absolutely no support from anyone else. And this is due to grace, as we have already talked, but the doctor emphasizes here that due to grace, that is why people, by nurturing their grace or their love with um, this, it's not faith, but this grace is, as we mentioned before, God's love, the doctor says. Due to this nurturing of love, they're willing to grow, increases. And that is why sometimes, even when they have the worst episodes, or are the worst episodes of their life, they want to grow, they want to overcome that situation. And that is why they put the effort and take responsibility and go forward and heal themselves. Sometimes with the help or the support of a therapist, and sometimes just on their own. And the ones that are not healing, or that are leaving treatment, or they don't want to really put the effort into growing, are the ones that we call they are resistant to grace, which is the name of this chapter. They are resistant to grace. And why are they doing that? We talk that they are doing that because we have, as human beings, the laziness in ourselves. We are lazy. We don't really want to put the effort into growing, and that's one thing. But the other one is the fear of power. As we also mentioned before, power is something that can help us take responsibility and act against this resistance. And actually, the doctor mentions here something that is called, and it is very, very known in the military, and it's called promotion neurosis. And I've seen this outside of the military. I've seen this in business cases or at corporate, when people want to be promoted, don't want to go to a higher level, maybe because they, even though they are sometimes offered more money for their job because they are taking more responsibility, sometimes they are taking charge of a whole project, they are having subordinates or a team to lead and to take care of in order to be successful with this project, with this business, or whatever they are doing. But they don't want that. They just want to stay at a low ranking position where they just are told what to do and they just do that and don't want to get involved into more responsibility. They don't want that. And though it's a valid and of course it's a decision for a person. In the military, this is actually called, psychiatrists know it as a promotion neurosis, which is this fear of taking responsibility. They just want to stay in the lowest ranks possible because they don't want to take responsibility, they want to take more tasks, or having to think and plan and do other things. They just want to be told what to do, and that's that. And that causes in people, when they are promoted or something, they actually start to present symptoms of neurosis, of this neurosis, present symptoms of some disorders or some some discomfort in their lives that they hadn't had before. So that is also something to take into account. If we are not feeling well, is it that we don't want to take responsibility? Why is that? And the doctor mentions that that is the feeling of is the fear of being in charge of something, is having the power to do things. Because if we have the power, we have also equal responsibility, because we are in charge. So we just continue being, in that case, partial adults. We are adults maybe in some aspect of our lives, and then we are like an infant in others. This happens a lot for most of us in many aspects of our life. Maybe we are really mature at our job, and then we are an infant in our personal lives or in our relationships, personal relationships with our own emotions. And sometimes it's the other way around. Maybe we behave like a child at work or have some traits of behaving like a child at work, some behaviors, and we are fully mature in our relationships at home, for example, with our relatives, those kind of things. And so the doctor finally, at the final part of the chapter, starts talking about a case of a patient of his. He doesn't mention her name. She mentions that she was, after some time, feeling, advancing in her treatment, and she came one day to the doctor and said, "Hey, I am so happy because I handled this situation like this and this, when normally with my family I wouldn't have been able to talk about things, and I did this and this and this, and I solved the situation. I feel really good because I could handle the whole situation that some time ago I couldn't have." So the doctor say, "Well, that's great, because you are now becoming to be really mentally healthy. You will find yourself doing this more and more in different situations in your life, because that's growing." And she say, "What? I don't want that. I don't want to have to be thinking all the time." And remember, we have talked about this, don't want to think about things in life, even though overthinking is another thing, but having to think and solve situations in life, that's maturing. And so the doctor was congratulating her for doing that and for being able to grow, and realizing that she would have to think a lot more in different situations, but thinking, also making decisions and taking responsibility and acting in order to solve those problems. And she said, "I don't want anything of that in my life." So she left, after some time, she left therapy. She left the treatment. She didn't want to be treated anymore. And the doctor reflects on how sometimes we are our worst enemies in this, because we are the ones putting the resistance to grace, and in this case, by putting our resistance to grace, or by resisting grace, by resisting this willing to grow, we are ourselves shrinking and getting smaller and less mature, and these partial adults. And also, we are the ones that have this fear of growing. We are the ones that have the fear of, a friend of mine called this fear of happiness. but the doctor calls it here this fear of being mentally healthy. And yes, we are the ones putting the obstacles in our own growing. So if we realize that, and we realize that we have the power of changing things, and we also take responsibility in doing so, act, that is something that, yes, it's fearful because you have to put the effort, and as we have mentioned before, and sometimes we think that we cannot handle that, and that maybe it's too much for us to handle, or too difficult, or we also feel, as we have mentioned in some episodes before, we feel alone because we feel that we are the ones that have to do the thinking, the action, taking the action, making the decisions. And that feels that when you are growing up to the top of the situation and you are putting yourself from another perspective, more thoughtful one, more loving one, it's a lot of work. So sometimes we feel that we cannot handle that. So yes, I think this chapter is really, really interesting as being one of the last ones, and trying to go into this conclusion, moving into the conclusion. See you in the next episode, the last one of the series, of the book actually. Then we will have another one with the afterwards from the doctor and some notes I have been taking, and maybe my personal ideas about it. So see you next Sunday. Bye bye.
Stay tuned for Ulua's next episode.